Tonight we began the second section of chapter 31, and we continued the theme of taking this person who was so battered from listening to the Alter Rebbe and felt so depressed and saying, not so bad, not really depressed. It's the best space in the negative field you could be. Actually, you're not even there anymore. You're actually in a godly space called Mariris. So let's understand what this Mariris is. So that's how we began this class, and I hope you enjoy. And if you find it useful, please subscribe so you can get more videos, and please like so more people will see these videos. We just started chapter 31 last week, and in chapter 31, just to remember the backstory of chapter 31, we are discussing a person who sincerely followed the advice of the Alter Rebbe, meaning a person who had this spiritual, stone-like, apathetic heart situation. And then he said, whoa, I got to heal myself. And he listened to the Alter Rebbe's fairly difficult, meaning very strong cure, very strong advice of chapters 29 and 30. I don't know if he did all three, 1, 2, whatever combination, but he did what he needed to do. And the good news is he was cured. That stone-like condition was completely gone. The bad news was he's depressed, because obviously any of those three strategies are going to leave you depressed. We said sort of like chemo. You got to do it, but you're going to afterwards have a general or specific weaknesses because the aftermath of that cure. So the aftermath of the cure the Alter Rebbe is presenting in chapter 29 and 30 is that you're depressed. Now, obviously, the Alter Rebbe is not just going to drop him. So now in chapter 31, we spend the entire chapter moving this person out of his depression, moving him to joy. So what we said thus far is, first of all, you're not entirely in Klipa land, so to speak. It's not as bad as you think. You started off with sadness, what we call hatzvos. But it wasn't, as we discussed last week, the terms. There's klipas tameos, that absolute thick, impenetrable evil. And then there's klipas noiga. Yeah, it's not godly, but it's an evil. You can access the godliness. You can extract that spark. You can use it to serve God. So your sadness isn't absolute evil, klipas tameos. It's klipas noiga, an evil that one can utilize and transform. Not only that, but it's actually the best part of klipas noiga. It's what we call toiv shebenaiga, the good of klipas noiga. You want to say hi to everyone? Water. Ask Talman for water, please. So it's toiv shebenaiga. It's the good of klipas noiga. It's still not godly. It's still a form of klipa, a form of evil. It's not absolute evil. It's an evil one can utilize to serve God. And it's the best cutting edge evil there could be, so to speak. It's the good of klipas noiga, because your sadness isn't over your broken washing machine. Your sadness is over your spiritual reality. So that's like the best you can hope for. So even when you started off in your worst space, you were in klipas noiga, toiv shebenaiga, the best edge within this reality where the godliness is obscured. It's obscured, but you can extract it. You can utilize it. It's the best part of it. And that's what we've said so far. What we're going on now to say is you're not even there anymore. Because to be honest, sadness, even klipas noiga, godliness that can be extracted from the evil, is a very dangerous space. Even toiv shebenaiga, the best of this situation of accessible godliness with the evil, is still a very dangerous space. We don't want you to stay there long, and you're already out of it. It already shifted to something else. And that's what we're about to learn. So we are in chapter 31. And we are 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 13 lines from the top of the page, 3 words in, right after the dot. V'al zeh ne'amar, and this is what it says. In every sadness, there's an advantage. Those are the words of King Solomon, wisest of all men, besides Mashiach himself. In all sadness, there's an advantage. Now, what is the advantage of sadness? We don't like sadness. But Hayisron, he has simcha haba achar etzev kedilacham. The advantage of sadness is the joy that's going to follow it, as will be explained. So you're in the best possible situation of sadness, but honestly, we don't like sadness in any color or form. This is the best version of it, but it's still sadness. But from the sadness, there's going to be an advantage, not the sadness itself. But as the Alter Rebbe explained to us in chapter 26, quite a while ago, B'chol etzev yeh mutar, in every sadness, yihiyeh, there will be an advantage. Not currently, not when you're in that space of sadness. No, depression is not a happy space, not a good space, not a positive space. But cutting out of it and going to joy, that's the post-sadness advantage. The joy that can follow that sadness, but not every sadness. Only a true sadness. As we're now going to explain what we mean by a true sadness. But in truth, truth is, you're not an atzvus. Atzvus, you're not in the space of sadness, of depression, of the best of klipas naiga. Klipas naiga, we don't want to be in anyway. That's not what's going on here. When you're thinking about your broken heart, your bitter spirit, your distance from God, you're being garbed in evil. No, that's not sadness. You're not there. Well, how do I know this? Because when you're sad, your heart is very shut down. You're depressed. You get very, very shut down. And you don't have like an energy going on in your heart. You're not like vitalized and excited and moving. To be like actively trying to change your situation. Oh, I'm sorry. I skipped. I am so sorry. I skipped the line. Oh, well, I don't know how I did it. I jumped. Let me go back. So we said sadness is not what you have. Because when you're in a sad space, your heart is shut down, you're stone-like, you're blah, you're energyless. That's what it feels. You can't get out of bed. Besides, there's no point, there's no purpose. You have no energy. You can't do it. You are so drained. You feel incredibly drained. The Alter Rebbe is saying. Aval, but you're actually in a better situation. And as we said, and for those that jumped on in the middle of my words, I want to go back. In the beginning of the chapter, right when this person completed the harsh but needed cure of chapter 29 and or 30, he was in the space of what we call in Hebrew atzvus, sadness, depression. The best of klipas naiga, which we still don't love, but you're out of it, the Rebbe says, because that is way too dangerous a space. So you climbed out of that really quickly. And instead of being in that best of klipas naiga again, meaning there's still a barrier around the godliness, it's accessible, you could get through it, you can transform it, but it's a very dangerous situation. It is not a good situation. It's really easy from that most godly depression one could have to fall into much lower depressions, and it's a very unhealthy space. So you get out of it. How do I know you got out of it, the Rebbe says? Because if you truly were in that depressed space, you'd be so drained and lifeless, can't move, no energy, no will, blah. That's not what's happening, the Rebbe says. So it transformed, it shifted. It might feel very similar inside, but the Rebbe says it's not similar at all. Now you're in a different status. You are not in the best of the evil, klipas, naiga, tayyib, sheba, naiga. You're actually in godliness. You're in the realm of holiness, of kedusha. Well, it doesn't feel very happy. I don't feel very happy in my situation. Well, you're not in a state of joy. You're in a space called merirus, which I'm going to poorly translate as energized bitterness. It doesn't have very good connotation, and it means something much better than that, but I can't think of another way to translate it. What's the difference between this depression and this energized bitterness? Because depression is klipa. It's evil. It's the best of evil. It's an accessible evil. It's an evil you can utilize, but it's still evil. Mariros, this energy of bitterness, this energy of I have to change, isn't godliness. It's gevura of godliness. It's not kindness and love. It's judgment and strength, but it's godly. Cannot compare being in the best of klipas naiga, the best of evil, or being in holiness. So you're not in that depression state anymore. You're in godliness, gevura, strength. It's a force. It's a judgment, but it's godliness. Because that other space is really, really, really dangerous. So you shift. It might feel very similar, but it's completely different. Because again, that sadness is a very, very dangerous space to be in. How do I know, the Rebbe says? Because if you're in sadness, you'd be way more drained than you sound to the Alter Rebbe right now. You'd be way more drained. But when you're in the space of this energized bitterness, godliness, strength, judgment, when you're in that space with your broken heart, adarabba, you've got energy in your heart. This Paul is marmer to need to change, to make a change, to be bitter and say, I got to change, I got to be different. This is not, I'm not accepting the status quo. It's not ultimately where we want you to be. It's not where you want to be. It doesn't feel great. The vitality is coming from godliness, but it's coming from, as we said, the gevura of godliness, the strength, the judgment, the discrimination of godliness. It's not exactly where we want to be, but at least it's godly. It's not so dangerous. And joy is where we want you to be. And that's from the kindness of God. As the heart is comprised of both. So when you initially finished this cure, you were depressed. You were in, as we call it in Hebrew, atzvos, depression. A place of evil, best within the world of evil. Noiga, it's accessible evil. Toiv shebenaiga, it's the highest edge of that evil, but it's still evil. And it's a very dangerous place, and it's a very slippery slope, and you can fall really fast. So stay there as short as possible. Switch it to mariras, to something in the realm of holiness, but not what we want, the joy and positivity and love, judgment, a bit harsh, but in holiness, because sadness is way too dangerous. So what's the difference? How are you switching it from this sadness? Or it seems this person did, but what's the change? What's the switch? So basically, as the Rebbe is saying, when you're in a space of sadness, you're so lethargic. You are so drained. You just want to sleep and you don't feel good after you get up. You just want to sleep more. There's no energy to do anything. And mariras means a movement of change. Mariras is a space when you're not as much focused on yourself as on God. Mariras is a space where you're not thinking so much about the past. You're thinking about the future. When you're sad, when you're depressed, you keep obsessing on I did, he did, she did, they did, we did, past, but it doesn't move anywhere. In mariras, you're thinking about the future. In atzvos, you're stuck. In mariras, you're changing. In atzvos, you're drained. In mariras, you're energized. So on the surface, or like very remotely, it might sound very similar. When we're actually looking at it, it's very, very different. And again, the main difference is this drained or this energized, this stuck or this change, this past or this forward. So we all, obviously this isn't an abstract lesson because this is what we all struggle with one way or another. We might not call it depression, and we probably don't use the term mariras, But we struggle. I mean, generationally, I think for sure our generation struggles with depression, with sadness, with being stuck, with feeling stuck. So can you identify within yourself the difference between these two? Can you discriminate and identify them? Have you had that experience? Do you think you can do it? Have I said enough about it? Or have you in the past, now that you're looking back and say, that was sadness, but that actually was, whatever that word is, Mariris. That was a movement forward. That was a movement of change, which means that's the best you can be in that situation because it's a godless space. Anyone? Anyone looking back can think about it and say, oh yeah, putting these nice, neat labels.
Hi, it's Dottie. Hi.
Hi, Dottie.
Hi. So before I became a Baal Tshuva, I would feel very depressed and very alone. And it was only through taking the Tanya classes with Yochanan Nathan in 1989 that I realized that I'm not alone. I shouldn't be sad and depressed. And that saved me. That saved me. These Tanya classes totally saved me because I was no longer alone and depressed. And Yiddishkeit opened that door for me from being a very secular person to feeling this sense of wholeness and godliness in my life. So I think Yiddishkeit provides the cure for the depression.
It does. It absolutely does. And you're blessed because you started off with the richest, most concentrated, deepest part. It really is. It's really like the best of the best of the best. You know, you know what I'm saying? You didn't start off on the fringe and gradually creep closer. You got dumped right in the vortex, right in the most powerful stuff. And you're blessed because absolutely, the more you know God is in your life and he cares and he loves, it helps us. It helps all of us. So that's definitely the cure. So we're definitely learning the cure. Anyone else can like sort of look back and say that was depression? No, that wasn't depression. That was like a holier version. That was reverse. That was me deciding to change. Didn't feel so much fun, but I was working on change. I wasn't stuck.
Cyril, can I just ask a question? It's not what you asked to say, but
okay.
We're talking about the person who already overcame something like heaviness of his heart.
Mm-hmm.
And so he already changed. Why is he sad?
He's sad because the cures the Alter Rebbe gave him were cures of emotionally crushing himself. Meaning he had to get out of he started off with this very thick, evil. I mean, again, we're not talking about ourselves per se, we're talking about the prototype person of these chapters. Of course, this applies for all Jews. We're talking about the prototype of this chapter was a very holy person, but for whatever reason had opened himself, made himself susceptible that the evil was able to get a grip on him. And it really was suffocating his heart. So to remove that suffocation from his heart, he had to follow any of the three or more than one strategy of the Alter Rebbe. And in all of those strategies, you basically emotionally crush yourself. You're either, in the first one for sure, you're just, and again, this person probably had a fairly decent spiritual esteem, like he didn't think he was a garbage. He didn't think he was such a, pretty holy guy. And he's really crushing himself to say, no, he's not. Like You know, we took out the magnifying glass, we took out the microscope, nitpicked the tiniest hair we could find to split it, to show, no, you really are far worse than you realize. And he had to really believe this to crush his heart, to crush the evil in his heart. That was strategy 1. And strategy 2 is not exactly the same, because he wasn't focusing on bad me, but he was focusing on enormous energy on the evil of his evil inclination, which is a little disassociated from you, but it's still very draining, realizing that you are feeding your enemy, and you've been feeding the enemy for years. And it all exists because of you, and then you put so much effort into it to remove, to consciously remove the light that you've been giving it. So that's a very draining, like, oh my gosh, experience. And in the third strategy, which was in chapter 30, again, there were a lot of positive benefits. There's also positive benefits in the second. There he like has this vision of God and realizes the only barrier is the evil he feeds. In the third strategy, the positive benefit, of course, was he has such a positive view of man and such a beneficent view of man, and he thinks so highly of everyone. But that came from realizing his own shortcomings and how potentially anybody on the street, any Jew, any non-Jew, is giving God more pleasure than I am. So again, to say it glibly doesn't cost us that much, but it's also not going to change and crush the evil in our heart. To get to the point where it crushes the evil in the heart, you have to really believe it. You have to really envision that anyone in this planet is giving God more pleasure than you are. Like, how much pleasure do you think you're giving God? Of course, from this, we went on to say we do have to give God this pleasure, and we're going to give God this pleasure, and we're going to give him more. But bottom line, to really believe this, which is what's needed to crush yourself, to crush the evil in yourself, you have to really be in the space of feeling anyone, perhaps, is giving God more than I am. Now, for a spiritually minded person, for someone who values his relationship with God, that's a very crushing thought. So any of these strategies leaves you feeling not good about yourself. That's the sadness. But again, sadness is very unhealthy. So he's trying to get out of it. And the Alter Rebbe now is trying to help him out of it.
Right. But as a result, the person feels like he overcame it, right? We say he managed to crush himself, and now he's better. He feels better.
He does and he doesn't, meaning he feels better that he feels that's better, because when he was with his stone-like heart, he wasn't feeling. So he feels. That's the good news. But the bad news is he's far less holy than he realized, and that's painful to a person who has been working very hard on his relationship with God. So it's paining him, it's hurting him that he realizes he's far more flawed than he realized. Everyone else in the world thinks he's wonderful, but he knows the truth. And he's actually being a bit harsh on himself. So the truth is probably not as bad as he's currently thinking, but his current thought is like, really, I'm so flawed. I didn't realize how flawed I am. And that's a very unhappy thought. So you're right. That's why I compared it. The metaphor I gave for it, maybe it's a bad one. It was just what sort of made sense in my brain, was if someone has a form of cancer and they undergo chemotherapy. So chemotherapy kills parts of your body. It's killing cells. It's killing sick cells. It's also killing healthy cells. So when a person finishes the treatment in the best state scenario, in the best, happiest version of the story, and that Yenemachla cancer is completely gone, which is a miracle, and we're so grateful to God, but the body is very weakened because healthy cells were also destroyed in the process. And now he needs to rejuvenate from that. It's far better than what he had before, but he has to rejuvenate from that. So this person here, and again, that's just a metaphor I made up, and it's not perfect. But this person here, he had this illness, and he like zapped away the illness with his very strong laser of crushing himself. But in the process, he also feels crushed. And feeling crushed is not a good space. bottom line, practically, we need to be in a space of joy if we're going to accomplish anything. If we're going to accomplish in this world, if we're going to accomplish in our relationship with God, if we're going to accomplish in the physical plane, the more joyous we are, the more successful we are, the more we give joy to others, the more we accomplish spiritually, the more we accomplish on the secular arena as well. We must be in a state of joy, and that is a very strong message from Tanya. And of course, think of children, we think of people that are struggling. If they're not happy in their lives and what they're doing in themselves, it's very hard to move people and to heal people. So that's why the Alter Rebbe, maybe somebody else, I hear what you're saying, Rachel would say, it's not so bad. As the Alter Rebbe is telling them, that's what the Alter Rebbe is telling the person, it's not so bad. And you're really not depressed. And you really have Maria Rose. And Maria Rose is already a godly space, so it's not so bad. So maybe someone else, not the Alter Rebbe, wouldn't even bother. Like, why is the Alter Rebbe devoting an entire chapter, all this ink? You know, we think like it's just easy. It wasn't easy. We have stories that the Alter Rebbe spent 6 weeks thinking about, yes, adding one letter, above. Above means and. Yes, add the and. Don't add the and. Yes, add the and. Don't add the and. It's not easy writing here. It took the Alter Rebbe, I don't know, something like 20 years to write these 53 chapters. So a lot of investment of self. Why'd he bother? He's telling the person, you're not in Klippa land anymore. You're not in a bad space. You're in a godly space. So if he's in a godly space, what the Alter Rebbe bother writing this chapter for? Because being in a godly space isn't enough. You need to be in a space of joy. And the person is not in a space of joy.
Thank you.
Serve, you need to be in a space of joy. So going back to our question was, and Dottie started us off, and that was beautiful what she said, and I got some texting of others affirming the same message that Dottie said. So Dottie, you're not the only one that's felt that. If now that we have a better understanding of the negative side of the coin, sadness, depression, whatever word you want to use for it, as versus the other side of the coin, which is still not happy. And that's why I just answered Rachel. We want happy. We all want happy. We all deserve happy. Anyone in our world that we're trying to help, foundationally, they have to be in a space of happiness to move. So this person's not happy. So he's not where we want him to be, but he's not in an evil space. He's in, as we said, Mariras, energized bitterness, forward thinking, change. I want to change. I want to move. I'm not obsessing on myself. I'm focusing on God. I'm focusing on the future. I have energy. I'm not drained and lethargic and listless and can't move and I'm so tired. So my question was, if we look at ourselves, and I did get some comments in the chats affirming that, yes, they can say, oh, that was depression. Oh, that's Mariras. I'm moving forward. I'm changing. I'm growing. Might not be a happy space, but it's a positive space. Anyone else has seen that in themselves, that they can now, maybe looking back, now that we have the lexicon for it, we have the terms, can say, oh yeah, that was not as bad as I thought it was, because it wasn't depression. I was forward thinking. I did make changes. I was thinking about Hashem. I was thinking about how I was going to do things differently. And so I was actually not in a bad space then. I might have been in a happy space, but it wasn't a bad space. It wasn't a great space. It wasn't bad. It wasn't dangerous, like sad. If I want to be upset, let me change. Let me be upset at the things that I feel I'm stuck with and not moving forward, and let me know I can move. I can change. I don't have to be stuck anymore. I don't care how many years I've been doing this. I take it all and like pour it in a positive way on yourself.